The night descends slowly. The air feels like a thin layer of fabric, resting over rooftops, drifting through trees, settling over stories that have not yet found their names. Between the damp breath of the earth and the faint hum of the wind, the journey begins. Quiet, unhurried, and soft. There are no footsteps rushing ahead, no voices breaking the stillness, only the rhythm of breathing and the gentle familiarity of silence. At the edge of a damp forest, a fallen log is returning to the soil. On its surface, a small round cap has appeared overnight, smooth, moist, and perfectly still. Long before language existed, humans stood before that simple shape as if it were a mirror of the earth. Sometimes they ate it, sometimes they avoided it, sometimes they simply sat and waited for the dizziness to pass. Over time, their hands learned to recognize the rim, the color, the texture, and memory began folding tiny pages of knowledge, which to keep, which to leave, which to touch, only when the mind was calm. Inside a dry cave, faded lines stretch across the rock. Figures seem to dance beside the round shapes, half hidden in the shadows. There is no need to explain. It was simply how a community remembered what it had lived. The warmth of fire, the scent of smoke, the slow wind entering from the mouth of the cave. Night after night, they passed the knowledge to one another as one passes a wooden bowl, not hurried, not forced, just placed gently in the hands of whoever came next. Then the path drifts into colder plains, where breath turns to mist. People walk through the wind, holding drums, eyes fixed on the horizon. They have learned to test and to withdraw, to watch the animals and understand what the body can bear. In the long, quiet evenings, someone sits still, watching shapes drift across the mind like clouds. Not to seek revelation, but simply to let the mind rest, something the daylight rarely allows. Elsewhere, the air grows warmer, heavier, with the smell of rain-soaked soil. On a bamboo table, a few dried mushrooms are neatly laid out. The elders remind the young of the seasons, of how to dry, how to wrap them in leaves. Small gestures, repeated carefully, enough for a village to pass through years of sun and storm. No urgency, no declarations, only the slow rhythm of a life understood through patience. The night remains long. Ahead lie other lands, other habits, other hands arranging mushrooms in kitchens, in medicine jars, in old notebooks with frayed corners. And when the journey ends, only a steady breath will remain, like the wind passing over rooftops, like the coolness of the earth beneath bare feet, like a quiet sleep that has finally arrived. When humans first met the mushroom. The night arrives, slowly, almost tenderly. It doesn't rush across the horizon. It seeps in like water through soil, patient, silent, inevitable. The air feels thick and kind. It softens the edges of everything it touches, the roofs, the trees, the small forgotten paths between them. Somewhere, a stream keeps a quiet rhythm, its current low and even. The world, for once, seems to have stopped moving. In this stillness, the story begins, not with kings or warriors, but with something small and wordless, something that grows in silence and disappears the same way. A mushroom. It rises from the earth's damp breath, from a fallen log hidden under leaves. Its cap is smooth and pale, its stalk thin as a finger. No one planted it. No one watered it. It simply appeared overnight, as if the earth had exhaled a secret. In the morning mist, early humans found it there, soft, cold, and waiting. They didn't yet know what it was. They didn't have words for fungi or for risk. The world was full of hunger and curiosity, and survival depended on the courage to try. Somewhere among them, a hand reached out, plucked that small, strange shape, and tasted it. The first taste was probably bitter, the second, maybe sweet. Then came silence, and then the beginning of a new kind of seeing. Some mushrooms filled the stomach. Some ended the day too soon. And some, the rare ones, opened a door that no one knew existed. People saw patterns where there had been none, colors where only grey had lived, sounds that felt like movement beneath the skin. The world around them changed shape, or perhaps they simply began to notice its depth. No one wrote about it. There were no books, no temples, no explanations. But deep in the stone walls of caves in Spain and Algeria, shapes appeared. Long figures, circles, clusters that looked like mushrooms beside dancing people. They were not words, but they were memory. The first record of humans meeting something larger than themselves and calling it wonder. When night returned, the tribe sat by the fire. Flames wavered in their eyes. The air smelled of smoke, soil, and wet bark. Someone held another mushroom. They passed it from hand to hand. It wasn't ritual yet. It was curiosity, a quiet experiment beneath the stars. The fire crackled. The air moved like a slow breath. They waited to see what would happen this time. Not all journeys began with footsteps. Some began with spores. Across centuries, the same fragile shape followed humanity wherever it wandered, through snow, jungle, and sand. In the frozen plains of Siberia, under the pale light of a sun that barely rose, mushrooms pushed through the frost, red and white, bright against the emptiness. The people who lived there learned to use them carefully. Their nights were long, their winters endless. They had little to lose and much to discover. Shamans, thin, patient, wrapped in fur, watched reindeer eat the red caps with joy, staggering and glowing with life, but not dying. From this, the people learned. They found a way to listen to the world through the body, to follow the rhythm between fear and knowledge. They didn't call it magic or medicine, they just called it life. In their stories, the mushroom was a messenger between two worlds, one we could touch and one we could only sense. Around fires in the snow, they closed their eyes and felt the pulse of the land beneath their feet. Not worship, not prayer, just listening. Far away in the jungles of what is now Central America, another people did the same, though in a gentler, greener way. The nights there were warm, filled with insects and the steady breath of trees. The Maya, the Mixtec, and the Aztec placed mushrooms on stone altars beside bowls of water and smoke. They didn't eat to escape life. They ate to understand it. The ceremonies were slow. Torches flickered against walls carved with faces. Drums murmured in the background. The air grew heavy with incense. And then, like a slow tide, the world began to glow. Serpents of light wound through the darkness. Shapes dissolved, reformed. People spoke softly to the air, to each other, to the memory of those who had come before. It was not wildness, it was calm, a shared dream inside the body of the earth. Long before anyone studied chemistry, these people learned something essential, that the mind could open quietly, like a door that didn't need to be forced. Thousands of miles away along the Nile, other hands picked mushrooms from the damp banks after rain. To them it wasn't a mystery, it was luxury. Pharaohs called them the food of immortality. They appeared overnight, vanished by morning, and tasted of the river's breath. The kitchens of Egypt learned to dry them in the shade, to mix them with honey and salt, to turn decay into nourishment. What once grew from rot became a delicacy of life. The world, without knowing it, was building a long and fragile bridge from instinct to meaning. From the forest floor to the thought that maybe everything alive was connected by something unseen. And as people moved, the mushroom moved with them, across mountains, across time. In Greece, it became part of quiet festivals in the fields of Eleusis, where grain, rain, and earth met in secret. People drank a cloudy brew, waited in darkness, and saw visions of birth and return. In Rome, it became a dish for emperors, fragrant and rich, served with olive oil and wine. Some dishes nourished, some ended dynasties. In the same bite, there was beauty and danger. And in the East, it became medicine, lingji, reishi, the mushroom of long life. People learned to boil it slowly, to sip the bitter tea, to wait for its quiet strength. The taste was not pleasant, but it was patient. The kind of taste that teaches you about time. No one owned the mushroom. No empire could claim it. It belonged to the ground, to the rain, to everything that grew from decay and returned to it. Wherever humans settled, the same small form followed, gentle, unnoticed, always ready to remind us that creation and destruction were just two sides of breathing. Centuries passed, people gave it names, stories, warnings. In some monasteries of medieval Europe, monks cultivated mushrooms in cellars between prayer and silence. They found that even in darkness, something could bloom. They studied the shapes, recorded the colors, tested them as medicine and food. The world outside feared what grew unseen, but the monks kept learning quietly. The same way mushrooms spread, through patience and shadow. In small villages, old women kept the same knowledge in baskets and jars. They knew which fungi healed wounds and which burned the tongue. They taught by showing, not speaking. When someone was sick, they walked into the woods, picked what they needed, and returned before dawn. No one asked how they knew. Everyone just knew they did. By the time the world reached the Renaissance, curiosity had become safer. Artists painted mushrooms in corners of forest scenes. Scholars dried them between pages, labeled them, drew them in ink. For the first time, they were seen not as symbols of fear, but as small works of nature's precision. Soft, symmetrical, almost sculptural. Then came the microscope, the first look into their hidden order. Spores, threads, networks. An entire kingdom of quiet labor. The same unseen workers that made bread rise, wine sweeten, and cheese soften. Every loaf, every sip, every preserved fruit carried the same ancient whisper. Life continues through transformation. By now, no one remembered the first taste in the forest or the cave paintings under rock. But the connection remained. Mushrooms had become part of everything: medicine, meal, metaphor, memory. They reminded humanity that decay was not an ending but a cycle, that every fall returned to growth, that silence too could be fertile. And so, when we ask when humans began using mushrooms, the truth is simple. It was before we were human as we know it, before we wrote, before we prayed, before we learned to name the sky. We found them, or maybe they found us, and ever since, they have followed quietly through every age, growing wherever darkness and life meet halfway. If you listen closely, you can almost hear them now, beneath the soil, beneath the cities, spreading slowly, patiently, connecting what seems separate. The same rhythm that moved through the first forests still moves through us. The night deepens, the air grows cooler, the story rests. The ground breathes under your feet, steady and warm. Somewhere out there, A mushroom pushes through the dark, silent as thought, certain as time. It does not hurry, it never has. It only grows, and waits, and remembers. And in that remembering, so do we. The Cave of the First Memory. The cliff stood silent beneath a pale sky. Wind brushed the stone with slow, hollow breaths, carrying the smell of dust and rain that hadn't fallen in days. Somewhere in that stillness, the memory of human hands remained. Faint outlines carved into rock, a rhythm of gestures frozen in time. You could almost see them, tall shapes with narrow limbs, half human, half shadow, moving in slow procession. Around them, circles and stems rose from the stone, the unmistakable shapes of mushrooms. They were not drawn for beauty or story. They were markings of memory, an attempt to record something that had changed the way the mind saw the world. Thousands of years ago, when language was not yet sound but gesture, the walls of dry caves became the first books. A single figure scratched into stone could hold what could not be said aloud. People had no names for dreams, for the dizziness that came after a meal of strange fungi, for the colors that shimmered behind closed eyes. But they had the instinct to remember, and stone was the only thing that lasted long enough to keep that remembrance. In the soft flicker of firelight, those carvings would come alive. The tribe gathered around, the children leaning close while the elders pointed to the mushroom shapes, tracing the outlines with worn fingers. They spoke not with explanations, but with rhythms. A tap on the stone to mean caution, a wave of the hand to mean vision, a hush to mean respect. The cave was both home and temple, both school and memory. Outside, life was simple and endless. Days were measured not by clocks, but by the slow passing of light through trees. They foraged roots, berries, insects, and the soft, pale fungi that appeared after rain. Nights were long, filled with the quiet whisper of firewood crackling and the faint sighs of people half asleep, their dreams stitched with the glow of the embers. They had no word for ritual, but they lived by patterns. When the rain stopped and the air grew heavy, they knew the mushrooms would return. The youngest were sent to gather them, the elders to test them. A taste, a wait, and then silence, listening for what the body would say. Some were healing, cooling the fever, softening pain. Others brought strange laughter or deep sleep. Some took life away. And so each generation learned by watching, not by asking. Knowledge passed through hands, not through words. On those cave walls, the shapes of mushrooms grew beside the figures of people dancing. The carvings seemed to move together, their lines merging, as if to say that the people and the fungi shared the same pulse. Perhaps that was the first hint of connection humans ever felt beyond themselves. The forest had given them food before, but now it gave them something stranger: awareness. In the dimness of the cave, time itself felt different. The sound of the fire echoed off the stone like a heartbeat. Shadows swayed over the carvings, and for a moment it might have seemed as though the dancers were still alive, still moving. The flickering light made them breathe. That illusion, the play between light, mind, and memory, was what kept those nights sacred. Someone, somewhere, must have realized that every carving, every rhythm, every pattern of movement was a way of remembering. The stone became their collective mind. They did not record for glory or legacy. They recorded because forgetting meant danger. Which mushrooms could feed, which could heal, which could kill. All of it had to be passed on. The next morning, when the air smelled of dew and ash, the tribe would rise and follow the same paths through the forest. their feet pressed into the same earth their ancestors had walked. Every broken twig, every wet patch of moss held meaning. When they found a new patch of mushrooms, they would look carefully at the shapes and colors, recalling what had been etched into stone. They didn't know it yet, but that act of remembering through pattern was the beginning of thought. Each discovery became a small ceremony. Before picking, someone would touch the ground beside it, as if greeting an old friend. They would whisper softly, not to a god, but to the forest itself, to the unseen rhythm that made things grow and decay. There was no doctrine, no worship, just an understanding that life moved in cycles. The mushrooms appeared when the rain stopped, vanished when the sun returned, and in that rhythm lay a kind of wisdom. When evening came, they returned to the cave, their baskets lined with soft leaves. The air smelled of earth and smoke. Children watched as the elders cleaned the mushrooms, some tossed into the fire to cook, others set aside for medicine. The night stretched long, the fire dimming into coals. The stories began again, quiet, repetitive, steady. They were not told to entertain, but to remember. The same movements, the same sounds passed from one generation to the next. Over time, the carvings deepened. The figures grew more abstract, less about shape, more about motion. The mushrooms looked like suns, their stems like rays, spreading out across the wall. It was as if the artists were trying to draw something that could not be seen, something that lived between dream and waking. Perhaps they were trying to record the feeling itself, that strange expansion of awareness when the world seemed to breathe with them. Those rock markings would last long after the people were gone. Wind would carry away the smoke, the trees would fall, but the lines in stone would remain. Thousands of years later, archaeologists would call them shamanic art, but to those who made them, they were simply reminders, not of gods, but of understanding. And what did they understand? That everything living was connected by a kind of quiet thread. The mushrooms grew from what had died, feeding on darkness and decay. Yet from that decay came renewal, food, medicine, vision. To eat them was to take death and turn it back into life. It was the oldest metaphor humanity ever found, carved into rock and retold in the glow of firelight. In the still air of those caves, time did not move forward. It looped. Every generation added new lines, sometimes over the old ones, as if layering memories atop one another. The walls became not a record, but a pulse, the beating heart of collective memory. Each mark meant that someone had lived, learned, and passed it on. Outside, the night spread wide and patient. The forest murmured with insects and slow wind. Somewhere, new mushrooms were pushing through the damp soil, small and unassuming, unaware that they had shaped the minds of those who walked above them. It would be millennia before anyone named the process, before science spoke of mycelium, spores, and networks. But the people who carved the first mushroom shapes already knew, in their own way, that life was never solitary, that the forest remembered, even when they did not. And so the story stayed, etched on stone, whispered in sleep, reborn in every gesture of a hand tracing a familiar line. 1,000 years later, when others would find those caves, they would not see fear or superstition. They would see a memory made visible, the first quiet sign that humanity had begun to think in patterns, to pass wisdom without words. In the end, it was never about worship, it was about rhythm. The rhythm of rain falling on stone, of fire flickering across carvings, of memory moving from one pair of eyes to the next. A world where time breathed slowly and the earth taught by repetition. the frozen plains, and the slow rhythm of ritual. The air here is thin and white. It moves slowly, like smoke that has forgotten where to go. The snow is packed tight over the earth, soft at the surface but heavy underneath. When you walk across it, the sound is a muted crunch. Steady, rhythmic, almost like breathing. In the far distance, the horizon disappears into a line of grey light. The world feels empty, yet nothing here is truly still. A few shapes move across the frozen plain, dark figures wrapped in fur, faces hidden by frost, steps deliberate and even. Each exhale rises like a small cloud before fading. They carry bundles, drums, and a silence that has learned how to survive the cold. The air smells of smoke, pine, and reindeer hide. At the center of this endless whiteness stands a small circle of tents made from skin and wood. The fires inside them burn low, their flames whispering through the cracks. Around those fires, life is reduced to the simplest things: warmth, food, and waiting. The people who live here have learned to move with the rhythm of the seasons, the long winter of sleep, the brief summer of light, and the uncertain days in between. When the snow grows deep enough to swallow the horizon, their world becomes a single color. Days blend into nights. Time is measured not by the sun, but by how much wood remains for the fire. The people work quietly, scraping hides, melting snow for water, repairing tools. Between the chores, they rest, gaze into the flames, and listen. Somewhere outside, the animals move through the snow. Reindeer, light-footed and graceful, dig through the ice with their hooves, searching for what lies hidden beneath. They find small red caps poking through the frost, mushrooms, bright against the white, like drops of paint on a blank canvas. The people notice. They always notice. At first they only watch. The animals eat the mushrooms with a strange joy, tossing their heads, stumbling a little, then standing as if the cold has stopped hurting. The humans observe this quietly. They do not laugh, do not speak. They see that the animals do not die. They see that something changes in them, a kind of freedom, an energy, a shimmer in the way they move. So the people begin to gather the red caps too, carefully, one by one, brushing away the snow. Their hands are rough, their gloves stiff with ice. They know that in a land where nothing grows easily, anything alive deserves attention. They bring the mushrooms back to the tent, lay them near the fire to dry. The smell is earthy and faintly sweet, like wood after rain. Some are left whole, others cut thin and laid on birch bark. Outside, the wind hums across the plain. Inside, the air thickens with warmth. The people talk in low voices. They recall how one of their elders once tried a piece of the red mushroom and fell into a long sleep. Not death, but not waking either. He woke hours later with calm eyes and spoke of seeing lights that moved like rivers. The tribe remembered his story not as miracle, not as myth, but as something to be careful with. Over time, they learn. They dry the mushrooms longer. They share smaller pieces. They learn how much is too much, how little is nothing. They learn that reindeer can eat what would harm them, and so they find a way to make it safe. The ritual grows slowly, shaped not by belief but by observation. When the air outside turns blue and the stars sharpen, they begin. A few people sit together around the fire. The drum rests between them, a circle of skin stretched over wood. The rhythm is slow, steady, never rising. One beat follows another like the heartbeat of the land. The sound fills the tent and presses softly against the air. Someone passes a small cup carved from horn. The liquid inside is dark, tasting of pine and smoke. It carries traces of what the reindeer have eaten, filtered, softened, less dangerous now. The people sip slowly, their eyes remain open, their bodies relaxed. The drum continues. There are no words, only breath, warmth, and the faint hum of the drum echoing against the snow outside. Minutes turn to hours, though no one measures. The world outside the tent is quiet. The wind has paused. Inside, the fire burns to embers. Faces glow in the dim red light. The mushrooms begin to work, not as fever, but as a widening of space. The air feels larger. The heartbeat of the drum becomes distant, then returns, as if the world itself is breathing in and out. No one calls it magic. It is simply a shift, a stillness that folds itself around every sound. The people see faint patterns in the smoke, lines that rise and dissolve. They feel the floor beneath them, the pulse of the frozen ground. Some close their eyes, some watch the slow movement of the embers. The experience is shared, but also private, each person alone in the same quiet space. Outside, the reindeer gather near the tents, their bodies steaming in the cold. They nudge the snow, searching for more mushrooms. Their breath forms a white cloud above them, drifting upward. The herd moves slowly, their bells muffled. The humans listen to that movement, the soft tapping of hooves, the jingle of bone charms tied to harnesses, the distant sigh of wind over snow. They do not think of visions or gods. They think of endurance, of warmth, of the long patience that keeps them alive in this frozen world. The ritual is less about seeing and more about resting, a place between waking and sleep where the mind no longer runs ahead. It is a pause within the long rhythm of survival. When morning comes, the sky is pale grey, the fire has gone out. The tent smells of smoke and ash and faint sweetness. The people rise slowly, moving carefully, as if their bodies are remembering how to be heavy again. They eat what remains of the dried meat, drink melted snow, and begin to prepare for another day. No one speaks of what they saw or felt. There is no need. Each face carries the same calm, the same quiet knowing that life can stretch wider than hunger or cold. The mushrooms, red and white, lie drying near the entrance. Small reminders that even here, in the hardest landscape, the earth still gives something alive. By midday, the snow begins to fall again, light at first, then steady. The people pack their things, load the sleds, and move on. The plane swallows their tracks almost immediately. Behind them, the sound of the drum lingers in the air, fading into the wind. In the evening, when the fire is lit again in another camp, the same rhythm will begin. Slow, steady, endless. The mushroom, the drum, the breath, the silence. Together they form a pattern older than memory. Across centuries the world will change, but this moment will remain. The quiet experiment of a people listening to the earth through their own bodies, learning to find stillness in the middle of frost and emptiness. There is no lesson in it, only rhythm. A sound repeated through time, one slow heartbeat in the snow. And as the wind moves across the plains again, everything returns to what it was before. Cold, white, silent, and alive. The tropical forests of the Americas, the slow ritual of warm rain and quiet order. The air here is different. It does not move sharply like wind across snow. It lingers. Every breath feels heavy, wrapped in mist. The forest breathes with you, slow, damp, unending. Leaves drip quietly after the rain. The trunks of ancient trees shine with a wet green sheen. Vines hang low, carrying droplets that catch the last light before falling. The ground is soft and dark. When you step, your feet sink slightly into the soil, releasing the scent of something both alive and decaying. It is the smell of roots, water, and time. Beneath the trees, mushrooms rise in quiet colonies, small white domes, thin coral shapes, bright yellow stems, red speckled caps. Some cling to wood, some grow from fallen leaves, some hide beneath moss as if shy of daylight. The people who live here know them all. They do not name them in books. They name them in memory, in touch, in taste. Each family knows the pattern of the seasons, when the rains come, when the ground breathes, when the mushrooms return. In the dry months, the forest sleeps. In the wet, it awakens in color. Long before dawn, before the first bird cries, they rise. The village moves with quiet purpose. Smoke curls from the cooking fires. The air smells faintly of corn, clay, and rain. Women carry woven baskets lined with palm leaves. Men take knives dulled by years of use. Together they walk toward the forest, following paths known only to those who have walked them since childhood. The sound of their footsteps is soft, absorbed by the mud. The forest at morning is not silent, it hums. Insects buzz close to the skin, frogs call from unseen puddles, and the wind moves in slow spirals through the high branches. Drops of water fall at irregular intervals, forming their own patient rhythm. The people move in the same rhythm. Step, pause, look, kneel. Between roots under fallen logs, the mushrooms reveal themselves. They are not hurried, they pick only what they need. Some are chosen for food, thick, meaty caps that dry well over the fire. Others are thinner, fragile, left to spread their spores. A few, small, brown, nearly hidden, are gathered carefully, wrapped in leaves, carried apart. Those are not eaten for hunger, they are set aside for the evening. By noon, the baskets are full. The people return. The village smells of earth and wet cloth. The mushrooms are spread on mats to dry under filtered sunlight. The older ones inspect them, sorting by size and color. It is a work of precision, no one speaks much. Every hand knows its task. When evening comes, the air thickens again. The forest darkens, not suddenly but slowly, as if the light is sinking into the soil. Smoke from the cooking fires rises straight up into the heavy air. The sound of insects grows louder, a long, steady chorus that replaces the voices of people. Dinner is simple: roasted maize, cassava, and the mushrooms that were gathered that morning. Later, after the meal, another kind of preparation begins. In a small clearing, they arrange a circle of stones. The ground is swept clean. Leaves are laid down, green against brown. A pot of water warms slowly over a low flame. Into it go the mushrooms that were set aside, not the ones for food, but the ones for the inner quiet. No one calls it a ceremony. It is simply a part of life. The youngest watch, curious but calm. The elders work with measured movements, stirring, dividing, pouring. Each person receives a small clay cup, no more than a mouthful. They sit together in silence, facing the trees. The forest listens back. The taste is earthy, bitter. The warmth moves slowly through the body, spreading like the feeling of rain on skin. Around them, the forest begins its nightly transformation. The fireflies appear first, small, floating sparks weaving between trunks. The air glows faintly. The sound of the insects merges with the heartbeat. Nothing spectacular happens. No one speaks in tongues, no one trembles. They simply breathe. The mind grows still enough to notice how alive the night truly is. Each sound, each scent, each flicker of light becomes part of a single, slow rhythm. The people listen, not for meaning, but for balance. The ritual is not about vision. It is about returning to the right pace, the pace of rain falling, of leaves decomposing, of the forest feeding itself again. An elder begins to hum softly at first. It is not a song, only a tone that vibrates with the sound of the forest. Others join one by one. The hum travels through the clearing like smoke. The fire flickers lower. The rain starts again, gentle, constant. The sound of droplets on leaves blends with the voices until they are the same. Hours pass this way. No one marks the time. The rain thickens, then slows. The fire collapses into red ash. The night deepens until it feels endless. Some people close their eyes. Some keep them open, watching the air move between the trees. When the rain finally stops, the forest holds its breath. The only sound left is water dripping from the canopy, steady and slow. In that stillness, they begin to rise. Each person moves as if waking from a light sleep. They collect the cups, cover the fire, gather the wet leaves. There are no words, only gestures. Someone passes a gourd of water. Someone wraps the pot in cloth. They walk back to the village in near darkness, guided by the faint glow of moss along the path. Back in the huts, the night continues quietly. The air inside smells of smoke and wet wood. The children are already asleep. The older ones lie down on mats, listening to the fading rhythm of the rain. The body feels heavy but calm, like soil after it has absorbed enough water. When morning comes, the light returns slowly, slipping through cracks in the thatch. The forest steams in the sun. The mushrooms that remain are turned over on their mats, drying further. Life resumes its routine. The people tend to their gardens, mend nets, grind corn, weave baskets. No one mentions the night. They do not need to. What was shared is not discussed. It is understood. Over generations, this rhythm becomes law. Children learn which mushrooms return first after rain, which appear only once each season, which grow near certain trees which should never be touched. They learn the order of preparation: gather, clean, slice, dry, boil, share, and wait. Each step is part of the same quiet rule: do not rush, do not waste, do not forget. The forest rewards patience. When the rains come late, the people wait. When the mushrooms appear in strange places, they follow the animals to find them again. The knowledge passes not through instruction, but through imitation. A child watches the way an elder cuts a stem, the way they smell the cap before placing it in the basket. Memory becomes a kind of map, drawn without ink. Even after many years, the rhythm remains unchanged. When the air grows heavy and the soil darkens, the same slow procession begins again: gathering, sorting, drying, sharing. It is not belief or tradition. It is habit, shaped by time, by necessity, by the patience of living with the forest instead of above it. By night, when the rain begins again and the frogs call through the dark, the same small circle of people gathers beneath the same trees. The firelight trembles on wet bark. The hum returns, low and steady. The forest listens. There is no ending to this story. Only repetition. A cycle of warmth, growth, decay, and return. In the heart of the tropical forest, every drop of rain falls with memory. Every mushroom that pushes through the soil carries a pattern older than language. The slow agreement between earth, water, and time. And somewhere, under the wide green canopy, people still follow that rhythm. They gather before dawn, move quietly through the mist. Bring what the forest gives and share it before the night. No miracle, no fear, just the long patience of life repeating itself, season after season, rain after rain, until even silence begins to sound like understanding. The great river and the distant court, mushrooms of gold and knowledge of use. Morning arrives through mist. The river is wide and slow, its surface reflecting the color of metal. Barges move soundlessly, their hulls cutting narrow paths through the pale water. On both banks the land glows with damp green. The smell of mud, silt, and faraway rain fills the air. The people along this river have learned to move with it. Their houses rest on stilts, their boats are tied with ropes made from reed and hemp. When the sun rises, they open shutters of woven bamboo and let the warm air pass through. The rhythm of the day begins the same way it has for centuries. The sound of oars, the calling of vendors, the faint percussion of wooden poles striking against water. Among the goods that travel this river, some are simple: rice, clay, salt. Others are rare: spices sealed in oil, dried herbs, and small woven baskets lined with paper and ash. Inside those baskets are mushrooms, light as dust, worth more than pearls in the distant markets. They come from far inland, from forests that breathe mist all year round. There, beneath cedar and camphor trees, people search the undergrowth for what the merchants call the flower of decay. The work begins before sunrise. Men and women move quietly among roots and moss, guided by instinct and by memory. They carry flat baskets and long knives. Each mushroom is cut carefully, leaving a portion of the stalk to grow again. The gatherers turn them gently, checking the color beneath the cap. Pale gold means freshness. A darker rim means the day is already too late. They clean the soil with soft leaves, never washing in water. Then they lay the harvest in the open air until the morning mist has lifted. By midday, the forest smells faintly of spice and wood. The baskets are filled, and the journey begins down the mountain. Along the way, each family sorts its harvest, the largest for tribute, the smaller ones for trade. Dried under thin sunlight, the mushrooms lose their weight, but keep their scent, a mix of pine, smoke, and rain. When they reach the river port, the traders are waiting. Their boats are long and narrow, painted with black lacquer that shines even under clouded skies. The mushrooms are weighed, packed into paper boxes, then stored in the cool belly of the barge. The voyage to the capital takes many days, following the slow pull of the current. At night, the boatmen sleep among sacks of rice and bales of silk. The river hums around them. The sky above is filled with the same faint haze that hangs over the city they are approaching. A city of tiled roofs, bronze bells, and long corridors of shadow. In the palace kitchens, the air smells of steam and fire. Cooks move like dancers, each motion precise, rehearsed. They prepare soups of seaweed, fish, and wild mushrooms brought from the far provinces. Servants carry trays of lacquer and silver through doorways covered in screens. The food arrives at the inner hall where silence rules. Here, at the tables of those who govern, mushrooms are not mere food. They are symbols of refinement, of control, of the balance between nature and artifice. Some are sliced thin and dried into powder to scent the broth. Others are soaked in rice wine and served with ginger. A few are carved into shapes, cranes, blossoms, clouds, and arranged on porcelain plates that gleam under lamplight. Each flavor is a record of distance, from the mountain where the gatherers walked barefoot, to the river where the traders loaded their boats, to the palace where the meal ends without a word. But in the quieter rooms behind the kitchens, another work continues. Along long wooden tables lie hundreds of dried stems and caps, labeled in careful handwriting. The royal apothecaries study them under lantern light. Each variety is noted: color, texture, place of origin, month of harvest. To them, mushrooms are not delicacies but ingredients. They grind them into powders, boil them into tonics, and mix them with roots, minerals, and honey. Their records are written with patience. For fever, steep in warm water for one night. For weakness, dry under shade, mix with ginseng. For wounds, crush and bind with rice paste. No philosophy hides here, only the quiet logic of repetition. What works is kept, what fails is crossed out. In a corner of the same chamber, another kind of learning unfolds. Young apprentices sit with bowls of dried fungi spread before them. The master speaks softly, pointing with a wooden stick. "This one," he says, "grows on the north side of the cedar." He traces its shape in the air. "This one prefers the roots of willow, and this one dies if the rain comes too early." They repeat these lessons until they can recognize each kind by touch alone, by the curl of the cap, by the scent left on the fingers, by the color that changes when light passes through it. Their craft is not about belief. It is about noticing what others ignore. In the city markets, mushrooms appear again, not the rare ones of the palace, but their cousins from nearby forests. Vendors arrange them in neat rows, sorted by color and use. The air hums with quiet bargaining. Housewives touch the caps, weigh them in their palms, and ask how long they will keep. They know the rules. Fresh mushrooms for the evening meal, dried ones for the winter. Those too delicate to last are sliced thin and dried above the stove. Those meant for healing are packed in paper, stored in clay jars, and labeled with the month and moon phase. Each home keeps a small shelf for these things, not for wealth, but for readiness. When someone grows weak or cold, the remedy is simple: water, heat, patience. Over the years, the craft deepens. People learn to recognize not only what the eye can see, but what the air can tell. If the forest smells sweet after rain, the mushrooms will bloom quickly. If the wind blows dry from the west, the soil will rest. They learn that mushrooms drawn from too rich a place lose their strength. The best grow where decay and life share the same thin border. In this knowledge, there is no ceremony, only observation. A good gatherer watches the insects, the color of moss, the sound of water moving under roots. The mushroom is not hunted, it is found by waiting. The art is in patience, not pursuit. In the capital, the season of tribute continues. Couriers arrive from the provinces bearing gifts, scrolls, lacquer boxes, jars of preserved herbs. Among them are packets of mushrooms, their paper wrappings stamped with seals. The courtiers open them carefully, inhaling the faint scent of the forest. To the ruler, they represent both nourishment and control, a sign that the farthest provinces still send their offerings with care. At banquets, guests comment on texture and aroma. Scholars write verses comparing mushrooms to clouds, to thoughts, to fleeting perfection. But outside the palace walls, the same mushrooms dry in the open air, sold for a few coins. The difference is only distance, the same earth, seen through different eyes. When night falls over the city, the kitchen's quiet. The last pots are washed, the lanterns lowered. In the apothecary's room, the master closes his records and brushes dust from his hands. Outside, the air smells faintly of river water and smoke. Somewhere beyond the walls, on the banks where the barges rest, a fisherman dries his small catch beside a pile of leftover stems. He doesn't know their names or worth. He only knows they will keep hunger away for another night. He threads them on a line, holds them near the fire until they turn light as paper. The embers crack softly. The river keeps moving. In the distance, the The palace bells ring to mark the hour. The sound travels across the water, soft and slow, fading into mist. Here, life has arranged itself into layers. The gatherers in the mountains, the traders on the river, the cooks in the palace, the healers in the quiet rooms, the fishermen by the fire. Each plays a part in the same quiet system, bound not by order or law, but by usefulness. The mushroom connects them all. It is food, medicine, ornament, and memory. It grows from decay, but sustains life. It travels without a sound, yet ties one end of the world to the other. By the time dawn returns, the river will already be full of new boats, new baskets, new harvests. The air will smell of silt and rain again. The rhythm continues, steady, measured, unending, like the river itself. The Mediterranean coast, fermented grain, and the long table of evening light. The sea rests quietly at dawn. Its surface is pale blue, trembling where the first light touches. The breeze carries the scent of salt and wet stone. From the hills above the shore, olive trees stand still, their silver leaves glinting faintly. The land here is dry, the soil thin and warm, yet it has learned to give what it can. Wheat, barley, grapes, and the faint sweetness of figs that cling to the cliffs. This coast has always lived by routine. When the sun climbs, farmers lead their mules down to the terraces. They move slowly, cutting grain that has ripened under the same wind for centuries. The sheaves are stacked in circles, their ends pointing inward like spokes of a wheel. Each bundle will be beaten, sifted, and stored in clay jars before the next tide of wind arrives. Grain feeds the body, but here it also becomes drink. At the edge of the village, behind low stone walls, the brewers begin their day. They mix crushed barley with warm water drawn from a shallow well. The air fills with the smell of wet husks and earth. A layer of foam forms as the liquid settles in its clay vat. For days, it will rest there in the half-light, watched over but untouched. In that stillness, something unseen begins to work. From the air, from the hands, from the vessels themselves, small lives drift in, wild yeasts, tiny spores, invisible threads of transformation. The surface trembles, bubbles rise, and the mixture thickens. No one speaks of it as magic. It is simply the quiet labor of time. When the scent turns faintly sour and the color deepens to amber, the drink is ready. In the cool of evening, people gather under an awning of woven reeds. The clay jugs are lifted carefully. The liquid inside is cloudy, alive. It is poured into shallow cups made from polished bronze. The taste is mild, slightly sweet, with a softness that deepens as it warms on the tongue. They drink slowly. Conversation fades. The world grows simple. Somewhere beyond the terrace, the sea keeps its own slow rhythm, a sound like breathing in sleep. The drink is not meant for intoxication. It is meant for listening. To the air, to the water, to the faint creak of wood as the night expands. Across the sea, in another port, ships unload barrels of grain and amphorae sealed with wax. The sailors move carefully, their feet echoing on the stone quay. They come from islands where the same ferment is made differently, but wheat instead of barley, wine instead of beer. Yet the purpose is the same, to carry the flavor of the field into the heart of the city. In the courtyards of those cities, long tables are laid. At one end sits the host, at the other the cook. Between them a line of dishes, olives, bread, lentils, fish, and the one that always arrives late, mushrooms cooked in oil and herbs. They are sliced thin, nearly translucent, laid over barley cakes or folded into stews. Their scent is quiet, not floral, not sweet, but deep, earthy, like the underside of a stone after rain. The cook moves silently. Each dish must arrive in the right order, each portion balanced. In this place, a meal is not a display of wealth, it is a measure of control. Too much salt, too little patience, and the balance breaks. The mushrooms are the most uncertain part. Some arrive from the markets of the north, some from the damp fields beyond the city. A few are gathered from oak groves after the first autumn storm. They are prized for their texture, soft yet firm, a taste that holds the memory of soil. But in every season there are warnings. The difference between feast and danger can be the width of a fingernail. The cooks know this. They cut a small piece, smell it, touch it to the tongue, and wait. Their knowledge is not written. It is passed from hand to hand, from years of caution. They remember stories of those who forgot, the banquets that ended in silence, the sudden stillness of a noble hall after laughter had begun. These memories linger, not as fear, but as rule. Know before you serve. At sunset, when the guests gather, the meal begins in low light. Oil lamps flicker, the air is thick with the scent of herbs, lemon, and grain. The host raises a cup of the same barley drink brewed by the farmers, though now refined, strained through cloth, cooled in stone jars. The sound of the sea fades as voices fill the room, soft at first, then rising in rhythm with the meal. Bread is broken, oil poured, laughter shared. The mushrooms arrive near the end, when conversation has softened and the air has grown still again. Their taste is subtle, almost silent, the way the forest itself might taste if it could be eaten. Beyond these walls, the same pattern unfolds in smaller homes. Families eat together under the open sky. They share the same bread, the same drink, the same caution. Children learn early to recognize what grows safely near the olive roots and what should be left untouched. The teaching is gentle, spoken without emphasis. A lesson carried not in words but in repetition. When the harvest is good, a portion of grain is set aside to ferment again. When the weather is kind, mushrooms appear early. When it is not, the people wait. In this rhythm there is no anxiety. The earth gives, then rests. So do they. The city markets close with the sound of wooden shutters. The scent of cooked grain lingers in the air. A thin mist rises from the sea, wrapping the streets in silver light. Down in the harbour, amphorae are stacked for the next voyage. Some hold oil, some wine, and a few, sealed more carefully than the rest, contain mushrooms, dried and pressed into cakes. They will travel north, across waves that move slower than time. In those distant lands, new cooks will open them, crush them into sauces, sprinkle them over roasted meat. The flavor will remind them of warmth, of evenings without wind. Thus, a taste becomes a map, a way for one coast to remember another. Far inland, on the other side of the mountains, the pattern repeats. Small towns echo the habits of the ports: fermentation, preservation, sharing. The brewers there work with grain stored from last year's harvest. Their vats are made of wood instead of clay. Their air cooler, their patience the same. The yeast comes on its own. The liquid turns golden, then still. At night, they gather in the courtyard, cups in hand. The fire burns low. Someone brings bread, someone else a bowl of mushrooms fried in oil. They eat slowly, talking little. The silence between them is not emptiness, it is rest. Over time, the craft becomes part of their sense of order. Every family keeps a small jar of starter yeast, a piece of the previous batch, a reminder that continuity depends on care. When the next generation brews its first batch, they add a spoon of the old to the new. The flavor remains unchanged, through decades. In the grand houses of the capital, the same grain, the same yeast, the same mushrooms appear, but refined into ceremony. Banquets stretch for hours. Musicians play softly in corners. The guests recline on couches, their robes falling in folds like waves. Servants pour wine and grain brew alike, alternating between sweetness and bitterness. The air thickens with talk of trade and harvest, of storms and ships, of things too large to control. On one of these nights, the cook sends out a dish of mushrooms glazed in honey and vinegar. It is delicate, balanced between sour and sweet. The guests murmur approval. But beneath that approval lies something else, awareness. Every bite is taken with attention. In this world, caution is a form of respect. Outside the palace walls, fishermen return from the sea. Their nets are heavy with silver fish. They tie their boats, light small fires, and cook what they have. A handful of mushrooms found near the rocks are thrown into the pan. The scent of salt and smoke fills the air. For them, there is no ceremony, only the simple act of warmth after work. By midnight, the city quiets. The waves break against the harbour stones, slow and rhythmic. The lamps in the courtyards fade one by one. On the terraces, the jars of fermenting grain still breathe softly, alive in their own way. Bubbles rise and burst without sound. The air smells faintly of yeast and sea. In the morning, the process begins again, measuring, stirring, waiting. The brewers watch the colour change, the cooks walk to the market, the farmers test the soil. Nothing here moves quickly. The lesson of this coast is patience. Grain becomes drink, decay becomes flavour, risk becomes wisdom. Each act depends on care, to watch, to wait, to know when the balance is right. The sun rises high, then fades. The same tide that touched the first amphora returns unchanged. The people follow it without haste. Between field and table, between earth and mouth, the work continues, quiet, constant, unending. In the evenings, when the air cools, the long tables are set again. The lamps are lit. The same barley brew fills the cups. The same mushrooms shimmer in oil. The same silence gathers when the meal reaches its calm center. And beyond the terrace, the sea moves on, dark, endless, and slow, carrying the reflection of those lights across its surface like small, patient thoughts that never fully disappear. The Eastern Mountain, mushrooms of longevity and the quiet record of medicine. The mountains in the east rise like folded paper beneath a pale sky. Their slopes are covered in cedar, pine, and mist that never truly lifts. The air here tastes of water and bark. When morning comes, light filters through the fog in long, slow lines. Nothing breaks the silence except the sound of dripping leaves. Villages rest at the base of these ridges, built from dark timber and stone pulled from the rivers. Roofs curve upward to shed the rain, and narrow paths wind between gardens of bamboo and moss. From above, the houses look like small boats anchored in a green sea. In this region, time moves differently. The farmers rise before dawn, boil water in clay pots, and begin their work in silence. They tend to the terraces where mushrooms grow, not in open fields, but in shaded groves of decaying wood. The air is cool even in midsummer. Each log, half buried in soil, is marked with a small strip of paper to show the date of its last harvest. The mushrooms that grow here are not for feast tables or distant markets. They are gathered for medicine. Their colors range from deep red to soft gray. Their surfaces dry and smooth, like old lacquer. The people call them forest hearts, though the scholars who record their uses give them other names: Lingji, mu-er, dongchong, xia, kao, the mushroom that becomes the insect, the fungus that becomes the herb. Every season, the gatherers climb the wet slopes with woven baskets. They move slowly, touching the trunks, turning the leaves, checking where moisture gathers and where it disappears. When they find what they seek, they kneel. They do not pull, they cut, clean, deliberate, and without haste. The mushrooms are dried in thin sunlight until they lose half their weight and most of their scent. Then they are sliced, laid on paper, and brushed with powder made from rice husk. Each piece is stored in a small wooden box. Nothing here is wasted. The stems become tonic. The dust from grinding becomes paste for healing burns. The act itself is quiet work, repeated year after year, until it becomes indistinguishable from breathing. Inside the village, there is a small building where the records are kept. Its shelves are lined with bamboo slips and stitched paper. Each record begins the same way. A note of weather, the time of harvest, the condition of the forest. Then comes the list of effects: to cool the heat of the body, to strengthen the breath, to restore the will after fever. The handwriting is even without flourish. No one writes of miracles. The tone is patient, observational. When an infusion helps, the scribe notes it. Repeated thrice with mild result. When it fails, the entry ends with a single line. No change. Across generations, these entries form a rhythm, an archive of quiet persistence, a language built entirely on watching what the body does when given something from the earth. At dawn, the apothecary's courtyard fills with steam. Copper pots sit above slow fires. Inside them, thin slices of mushrooms float among roots, bark, and dried fruit. The smell is bitter at first, then softens into something resembling rain. Apprentices move carefully between the pots, adding water from bamboo tubes, adjusting the flame. Each decoction follows a sequence learned by repetition. First comes the warming water, then the fungus to release its fibers, then the secondary herbs, ginseng for strength, licorice for balance, ginger to carry the taste deeper. When the mixture begins to darken, they lower the fire and wait. Hours pass without conversation. The only sound is the simmering liquid and the slow tapping of ladles against clay. When finished, the mixture is strained through silk, cooled, and poured into small glass bottles. Each is labeled with a date and a number, nothing more. The people who drink these tonics rarely speak of them. They simply begin the habit, one cup each morning, one at night, never rushed, never skipped. And they say the value is not in the taste, but in the constancy. The act of returning to it each day shapes the rhythm of living, to observe, to record, to repeat. This is how health is tended, not as conquest over nature, but as companionship with it. In the evenings, the apothecary closes his shutters and records the day's notes. He writes that the mountain air has turned colder, that the mushrooms dried faster than last week. He marks that a certain patient no longer wakes in the night coughing. Another feels less weary climbing the hill. He does not claim cause or cure. He simply records. Over time, the pages become a map of seasons, weather, and endurance. Outside, villagers light small lamps before their doors. A faint mist rolls down from the ridges. The sound of water dripping from eaves merges with the faraway calls of night birds. In this world of slow transitions, the line between medicine and daily life almost disappears. The same mushrooms that simmer in the apothecary's pot also appear in the evening meal, sliced thin and added to soup. The same roots used for fever become tea on a cold morning, No one speaks of balance, they live it. The rules are simple. Do not eat to fullness, do not rush warmth into the body, and let bitterness stay on the tongue a little while before swallowing. These are not commandments, but habits tested by weather, refined by time. Beyond the villages in the distant cities, scholars study the same materials under clearer light. In long halls filled with ink and scrolls, they boil, measure, weigh, and note. The records of the mountains become the formulas of the capital. The apothecaries' forest hearts are renamed according to system: Ganoderma, Auricularia, Cordyceps, Sinensis. The language changes, but the purpose remains. They observe how each fungus grows, some from soil, some from bark, one from the body of a moth buried in snow. Each form reveals a pattern of transformation: decay that leads to renewal, stillness that hides motion. The scholars write of these things without metaphor, simply describing how a thing becomes another through the patience of time. They test their findings with restraint. Powders are mixed into water, measured by grain, taken for 7 days, then paused for 7 more. They watch for small changes: steadier breath, calmer sleep, clearer complexion. The improvements are not dramatic. They come slowly, like dawn spreading across the valley. In their notes, certain patterns emerge: mushrooms that reduce swelling, others that help the body resist fever, still others that ease the lungs after a long winter. Each conclusion ends not with certainty, but with invitation to observe again, to confirm, to continue. From these habits, a philosophy of health grows, though no one calls it that. To live well is to maintain warmth without excess, to balance labor and rest, to let bitterness teach endurance. The mushrooms, in their silence, become symbols of this attitude, living things that feed on decay, turning what is fallen into what sustains. Along the lower slopes near the rivers, traders prepare for market. They pack boxes lined with paper, each holding rows of dried fungi labeled by weight and origin. The merchants know their routes by season. In spring, they travel south, where the forests are wet. In autumn, they move north, where the air is sharp and dry. Their goods are light but valuable, each box a condensed memory of mountains and mist. In the capital, physicians open these boxes in narrow shops that smell of earth and smoke. Customers arrive quietly. They do not ask for miracles. They ask for sleep, for breath, for steady joints in winter. The physician listens, selects a handful of slices and ties them in cloth. He gives no promise, only instruction. Boil slowly. Drink warm. Observe. In this way, knowledge circulates, not as discovery, but as continuity. What begins as fog on a mountainside ends as warmth in a cup. Each link in the chain, gatherer, trader, healer, patient, adds a layer of care. The record of these exchanges fills books that grow heavier with each generation. The language of the records is plain. This fungus strengthens breath when taken daily. This one clears the heat of the chest. This one brings balance when mixed with ginseng. None of these are declarations. They are small notes of observation, reminders to look again, to adjust, to wait. In the present, those records continue. Modern scholars press samples between glass, examine spores under light. They find compounds that align with old descriptions: anti-inflammatory, immune-supporting, adaptogenic. The words change, but the meaning stays. Each discovery confirms what centuries of quiet watchers already knew: that time and attention heal in ways beyond measurement. By night, the mountains return to silence. Fog slips through the trees, settling over the roofs of the village. The fires in the apothecary's room fade to embers. On his table, the day's bottles cool, their contents dark and clear. Tomorrow, he will begin again. Boil, watch, record. He does not search for perfection. He seeks rhythm. The rhythm of the body that warms, cools, and mends. The rhythm of the forest that decays and renews. The rhythm of the page filling line by line with notes of ordinary endurance. Outside, the stream keeps moving, carrying fallen leaves toward the lowlands. Somewhere far below, those leaves will settle, break down, and feed the same roots that will one day grow new fungi. The circle continues without ceremony. In this way, medicine in the East is less an invention than a listening. The quiet alignment of human patience with the slow intelligence of nature. The mushrooms remain the teachers. They grow where it is damp, but not dark, where death feeds life, where stillness hides motion. At dawn, when mist covers the valley once more, a farmer will wake, boil water, and pour a small cup of dark liquid. He will sip it, slowly, tasting both earth and air. He will not call it healing. He will simply call it the beginning of another day. Persia and the Silk Road, the path of powder and patience. The desert begins where the mountains end. The air grows warmer, the light sharper. The wind carries a fine dust that clings to everything. Cloth, hair, parchment, even the breath itself. Along this expanse of silence stretches the ancient road, not a single path, but a network of trails carved by hooves and wheels over centuries. Caravans move through it like slow rivers of sound, bells of camels, wooden wheels creaking, the muffled voices of traders wrapped in long veils. Each animal carries bundles sealed in leather, herbs, minerals, roots, and among them small jars of dried fungi. Inside those jars lie the quiet work of distant forests, mushrooms collected from rain-soaked trunks, cut, dried, and labeled with faint ink that still smells of pine. Persia sits at the heart of these crossings. Its cities rise from the desert like mirages of order, squares of sun-baked brick, shaded courtyards, domes of turquoise that hold the sky. Here, trade becomes knowledge. The markets are not only for goods but for words, recipes, methods, doses. One traveler brings a fungus from the mountains of China. Another offers resin from the sands of Arabia. In the apothecaries of Nishapur, Herat, and Isfahan, they are ground together until the borders blur. Inside a small shop near the bazaar, the air is thick with powder. Shelves are lined with jars of varying shades: pale gold, dark red, grey-green. The jars are made of glass, blown thin enough to tremble when touched. Each carries a handwritten label tied with cord. To cool the liver, to soften the breath, to strengthen the heart when it tires of heat. The apothecary works quietly, his hands stained with the dust of roots and minerals. He measures by habit, not by scale. A pinch for warmth, a spoon for calm, a breath of camphor to wake the senses. When customers arrive, they speak in the language of symptoms, not suffering. Too much fire in the chest. Sleep that does not return. A pulse that hesitates. The apothecary listens, nods, and begins to mix. His mortar is made of stone worn smooth by years of turning. He grinds slowly, the motion steady, circular. The sound fills the room like low rain. When the powder is fine enough, he pours it onto paper and folds it 3 times, sealing it with a brush of wax. No name, only a mark. Each preparation is both medicine and memory, the record of one body's attempt to understand another. On the back wall of his shop hangs a scroll filled with notes from earlier masters. The ink has faded, the words are brief. Too little, no effect. Too much, no return. The meaning is simple and enduring. Dose is the key. Between cure and harm lies only patience. At dusk, the marketplace cools, the wind changes direction. Outside the city gates, the next caravan prepares to leave. Their route will take them eastward, across the desert, over the passes, towards Samarkand and beyond. The apothecary hands a bundle to a young trader, wrapped carefully in waxed cloth. Inside are vials of powdered fungus, notes on dosage, and a small strip of bark inscribed with instructions. Dissolve in hot water. Drink before sleep. Record what follows. The trader ties it to his pack. When he rides out at dawn, the city still sleeps. Behind him, the sound of bells fades into the sand. Ahead lies the long breath of the Silk Road, the slow exchange of the world's quietest knowledge. Days pass, the sun burns without sound. At night, fires glow along the dunes, each one a small circle of warmth in the vast dark. The traders rest beside their camels, the scent of dry grass and wool thick in the air. They unwrap parcels to trade with the next camp. Salt for silk, resin for pepper, fungi for tea. No coins change hands. Only equivalence measured by respect. In the middle of this journey, a storm rises, the sky turns grey-brown, and the wind moves like a wall. The caravan stops. Men cover their faces, animals kneel. Sand covers the road until it disappears. When the storm ends, silence returns heavier than before. The world looks the same, yet everything has shifted slightly. Dunes, direction, distance. Still the travelers continue, guided by instinct and the memory of stars. Weeks later, they reach the oasis of Merv. The air smells of water and smoke. Palm leaves move against the sun. Here, merchants from India, Arabia, and the northern steppes gather. Among them sits an old Persian physician surrounded by notebooks and jars. He receives samples of the powders, examines their texture, and writes notes in small, careful script. He adds them to his growing collection, a map, not of territory, but of substances and effects. He keeps his records not for fame, but for clarity. Each line begins with the same phrase: observed on the 7th day, observed after fever, observed during cold season. His tone is calm, unhurried. He does not claim discovery. He writes to preserve rhythm, how the body changes, how the earth offers correction. From this habit, a system grows, equal parts science and intuition. The physician learns to classify by warmth and coolness, by dryness and moisture. Mushrooms are described not by shape, but by nature. Some are heavy and calming, others light and dispersing. A few, rare and bitter, are said to sharpen endurance during long winters. He marks their origins in the margins, from the forests of the east, from the foot of northern hills, from the caravan of year 13. In his small book, the Silk Road becomes a living archive. Each fungus, each herb, each grain of dust carries a story of soil, of air, of the hands that gathered it. Knowledge travels slowly, like fragrance, through cloth. By the time it reaches the next city, it has changed shape, name, and purpose. Yet its essence remains: transformation through care. When night falls, the physician closes his books. The lamps burn low, their oil faintly fragrant. Outside, the caravan bells sound again, moving toward another horizon. The jars remain on the shelf, sealed and silent. Inside them, spores sleep, fragments of distant forests waiting to awaken when mixed with water. Centuries pass. The desert shifts, cities rise and vanish, trade routes bend and break. But in every place the road once touched, traces of that exchange remain. In the laboratories of later ages, glass replaces clay, and microscopes replace instinct. Yet the principle stays the same. The balance lies in observation, in knowing that every substance has its measure, every medicine its moment, every life its pace. In the quiet rooms of modern archives, scholars still open those ancient Persian texts. The paper is thin, the ink pale, but the message endures. Between harm and healing stands the hand that waits. The apothecaries of Persia understood this long before chemistry had a name. They measured time not by clocks but by breath, by how long a powder took to dissolve, how quickly a pulse steadied, how softly a person fell asleep. Their science was patience written into practice. And along the Silk Road, that patience moved with the caravans, folded into parchment, packed into jars, whispered across languages. It crossed deserts, mountains, and centuries, never in haste. Because knowledge, like the fungus it studied, grows best in shadow, unseen, slow, and quietly alive. Medieval Europe, the monastery, the kitchen, and the garden cellar. The stone walls breathe with age. In the cold air of a medieval monastery, moisture clings to the edges of the floor, and the faint smell of wood smoke hangs between the arches. Morning light arrives carefully, filtered through narrow windows, touching the long tables, the ink pots, the wooden bowls. The monks rise early. Their steps are soft against the flagstone corridors. They move without speech, guided by habit more than thought. Outside, the fields are still pale from frost, and a thin mist covers the low garden walls. The sound of a bell drifts across the courtyard. Slow, hollow, familiar. In the lower chambers, beneath the chapel and the library, there are cellars carved into rock. The air is cool and damp, steady in every season. Here, shelves of clay jars line the walls, each labeled with faint writing. Some hold dried herbs, others hold seeds, roots, and curled brown mushrooms gathered from the forests nearby. The monks learned long ago that mushrooms grow best in shadow. They placed logs and straw in the corners of the cellar, sprinkled water from the well, and waited. Over weeks, small white caps appeared in the dark, their edges soft as parchment. They were neither miracle nor mystery, only another form of quiet labor, repeating the patience of nature. In their notebooks, written in Latin that faded with humidity, they recorded simple observations. Grows well in shade. Avoid sunlight. Best gathered before dawn. Another page reads, dried for 2 days by the kitchen fire. Ground with salt for the sick. These were not secrets, only methods. Knowledge passed through hands, not voices. A young monk would watch the older one, count the days, note the temperature by feeling the stone. The cellar became both garden and classroom. The discipline was not in what they grew, but in how they noticed. When the harvest was ready, the mushrooms were brushed clean with cloth, not washed. They were sliced thin and laid near the kitchen hearth to dry, the air smelling faintly of smoke and earth. The dried pieces would be stored in small linen bags ready for broth, for healing tonics, or for simple winter meals. In the kitchen above, the fire burned slow beneath a pot of barley. A few mushrooms were dropped in, not for flavor, but for substance. The broth thickened gradually, turning from pale to gold. A handful of herbs followed, thyme, sage, a sprig of parsley from the garden. The cooks moved slowly, stirring with long wooden spoons, each motion a rhythm rather than a task. Dinner in the monastery was not a feast. It was a pause in the day, a bowl of barley, a slice of bread, a cup of ale brewed from grain grown behind the cloister. The monks ate in silence. Only the crackle of the fire and the scrape of wooden spoons filled the air. One might think of prayer, but it was simpler than that. Attention without demand, stillness without need for reward. Outside the monastery walls, life followed a rougher rhythm. Peasants gathered mushrooms too, though without records or parchment. Their knowledge lived in memory. Which patch of forest to trust, which colors to avoid, which smell warned of danger. They taught by pointing, tasting, surviving. A grandmother's hand might hover above two similar caps and say, "This one feeds you, that one sends you to sleep forever." In their cottages, the mushrooms dried above the hearth. The smoke darkened them, deepened their scent. In winter, they were added to stews thick with root vegetables and a little salt. Every family had its own way, a difference in drying, in cutting, in how long the stew should rest before eating. Knowledge passed not in words but in gestures, a hand turning the pot, a finger pressed to test the heat. In the evenings, when the fire dimmed, people spoke softly of the land, not as property, but as something alive that had moods, generous one year, withholding the next. Mushrooms became part of that language. They appeared suddenly after rain, vanished by morning, impossible to predict. They reminded the villagers that the earth had its own timing. You could not command it, you could only learn to move with it. Back in the monastery, the cellar workers kept their rhythm through the seasons. When snow came, the air inside stayed unchanged. The damp walls protected their harvest from frost. In the margins of their ledgers, they began to note the patterns of illness. The old man in the village recovered after taking broth of fungus and thyme, or too strong when taken with wine. The monks did not call themselves doctors, though some would later become so. They were observers of cycles, body, soil, and time. In their hands, mushrooms were neither divine nor dangerous. They were instruments of balance. Sometimes traders from nearby towns arrived, bringing sacks of grain, beeswax, or dried fruit. In exchange, the monastery sold small parcels of preserved herbs and mushrooms, tied neatly with twine. The coins were few, but the respect was lasting. People trusted those who lived close to silence. As Europe moved through centuries of change, the same patterns endured. Villages grew, borders shifted, and the church changed shape, but the cellars remained dark, cool, steady. In towns, new apothecaries appeared, with shelves of powders and glass jars. Their recipes were longer, their words grander, but many still began with what the monks had written centuries before: soak, dry, boil, wait. The peasant kitchens changed more slowly. Fires burned the same. Pots blackened the same. Children learned which mushrooms to gather by following their mothers through wet meadows after rain. They carried woven baskets and a quiet sense of respect for what grew without invitation, for what could feed or harm depending on how it was handled. On a summer evening, when the fields shimmered with insects, the smell of cooking spread through the village: grain, smoke, and mushrooms. A family would sit by the door, eating from a single bowl. There was laughter sometimes, silence more often. Afterward, someone would add another log to the fire and turn the mushrooms hanging above so they would dry evenly before morning. In both monastery and cottage, life revolved around the same simplicity: collect, preserve, share. The purpose was never wealth, it was survival, tempered by care. Mushrooms, in their quiet way, became part of Europe's unspoken history. A bridge between forest and table, between prayer and hunger, between science and intuition. By the late Middle Ages, travelers began to write of these habits. They noted how monasteries smelled faintly of damp soil and broth, how their gardens grew in ordered rows, how their kitchens glowed faintly at night while the world outside was dark. They spoke of monks who could identify plants by touch alone, of farmers who could find mushrooms in fields others thought bare. Centuries later, the same records helped historians trace the roots of European medicine. Between the lines of Latin and weather notes lay a deeper rhythm: patience, observation, repetition. The art of healing, as it turned out, had begun not with scholars but with those who listened quietly to the earth. When night settles again over the monastery, the torches are extinguished. The last monk leaves the kitchen, wipes his hands and closes the heavy door. The cellar remains as it always has been: damp, still, faintly breathing. A few drops of water slide down the stone and fall onto the floor with a slow, rhythmic sound. In that silence, the mushrooms continue their unseen work, turning decay into sustenance, darkness into nourishment. The world above sleeps, but beneath it, the cycle continues. The slow conversation between earth and time, between hunger and patience. Renaissance to Enlightenment, the hidden workers of bread and light. Morning light filters through glass panes for the first time in centuries. It lands on a table scattered with instruments: brass lenses, glass flasks, crumbs of bread, and a single loaf rising quietly beside a window. The air smells faintly of yeast and ink. Somewhere, a clock ticks. The age has changed. The chants of monasteries have faded into the hum of workshops and the steady scratching of quills. Europe is waking into curiosity. The same mushrooms and molds that once dried in cellars are now being examined through glass. The lens of a microscope, new and trembling in its precision. Inside that small circle of light, a universe unfolds. Tiny shapes move among bubbles of air, threads, spores, and invisible clusters that seem to breathe. What once looked like dust is now alive. The scientists of this new world do not yet have words for what they see. They describe what they can: filaments like roots, patterns like frost, small bodies that grow without sunlight. In kitchens and breweries, the same mystery takes another form. Bread rises overnight, wine ferments in dark barrels, beer foams with life unseen. The workers do not call it science, they call it craft. Yet their hands perform the same alchemy, guiding invisible laborers who feed on grain and air. The city wakes to the smell of what those unseen lives create: warmth, sustenance, and a hint of sweetness that softens even the hardest morning. For centuries, people have praised the baker's skill or the brewer's patience. Now, through glass, the truth begins to shimmer. Yeast, a living thing, is the quiet engine behind it all. The invisible has a name. The breath inside bread is not magic, but life too small for the naked eye to see. Naturalists begin to classify the world again. They draw what they observe: rounded forms, branching lines, soft spores released into air. Some call them imperfect plants, others animals without motion. None of the words fit, but the attempt itself changes everything. The old categories blur. A new kingdom begins to form. Not plant, not beast, but something in between. In the margins of their notebooks, they write notes in gentle ink. It grows in darkness. It feeds on death, but gives life. Its purpose, unseen, is balance. The age of enlightenment carries these thoughts forward. Microscopes improve, lenses sharpen. What was once a shadow becomes form, then pattern, then law. Yet the tone remains quiet. For all the grandeur of discovery, the scene is small. A droplet of water, a slice of bread, a patch of mold glowing under lamplight. In the corner of every laboratory, a bowl of dough still rises as it always has, slow, silent, perfect in its patience. The same breath that lifted loaves in medieval kitchens now hums beneath glass slides and copper instruments. The invisible labor continues unchanged. By the time the scientists give it a name, the world has already depended on it for millennia. In that realization lies a gentle humility, that even progress, with all its brilliance, still rests on the quiet work of what cannot be seen. The still portrait of a desert queen, Zenobia of Palmyra. The desert holds its breath beneath the moon. Wind moves through the columns of Palmyra, carrying the faint scent of sand and stone. The city sleeps, its arches pale against the night. Once, torches had burned here, banners had fluttered above the gates, and a woman's voice had guided the rhythm of an empire. Zenobia walks through the silence she once ruled. Her steps are measured, her face calm. Around her lies the work of a lifetime, roads repaired, markets restored, schools of thought revived. She had gathered merchants, scholars, and soldiers beneath the same flag, believing that order could bloom even from dust. Her reforms were not loud, they were deliberate. New laws for trade, fair taxes for caravans, a balance between Rome's might and the desert's independence. In the quiet light of dawn, she would ride beyond the city walls, the wind pressing her veil against her face. From those high dunes, she could see the shimmer of the caravan trails, the long, slow breath of commerce and survival. Every decision she made began with that sight, the endless sand, the fragile peace that moved across it. When Rome turned its gaze eastward again, she did not run. She prepared her city not for glory but for endurance. Letters were written, supplies gathered, alliances sought. History remembers the battles that followed, but what truly mattered came before. The still hours of planning, the acceptance that every rise must bend toward its own horizon. Now the city stands empty. The noise of armies has faded. Only the wind remains, whispering through broken arches. Zenobia's journey ends far from here, in the soft hills of Italy, where olive trees lean toward the sun. Her days are quiet. She tends her garden, reads, and sometimes touches the carved stones brought from her homeland. The desert no longer answers her voice, yet its rhythm lives in her stillness. Empires pass. Sand returns. But the trace of one woman's resolve remains, calm as the moonlight on Palmyra's ruins, where wind and memory move together, soft and unending. The quiet houses of ancient Athens. The streets outside are filled with voices, merchants calling, children running, men debating beneath the columns of the agora. But behind the stone walls, the city falls silent. In the courtyards of Athenian homes, the air is still, holding the rhythm of a smaller, quieter world. Here, women move through shaded corridors, their steps soft on the clay floor. A loom hums gently in the corner, threads crossing in calm precision. The smell of olive oil and freshly baked bread lingers in the air. In a small storeroom, amphorae line the walls, grain, wine, oil, each marked, counted, and cared for. Order in this house is not spoken, it is woven, tallied, and passed down. Children play beneath the fig tree at noon. A mother teaches them songs about gods and seasons, lessons not of books but of rhythm and restraint. The day moves with quiet discipline, tending, mending, teaching, waiting. Beyond these walls, Athens praises logic and freedom. Within them, it practices endurance. Every household is a small republic of its own. While men argue about justice, women keep the accounts balanced, the food measured, the home standing through drought and war. They are not named in public speeches, yet the city depends on their constancy, the invisible order that keeps the visible world from collapsing. At dusk, the house grows dim again. The loom stills, the fire softens, the voices fade. Outside, Athens glows with ambition. Inside, it breathes in silence. In these quiet rooms, civilization endures, not through power or fame, but through the steady hands that hold life together, one thread, one meal, one breath at a time. The walls that remember, Pompeii. The city no longer breathes, yet its walls still speak. Along the narrow streets of Pompeii, the stone carries faint marks, letters scratched with nails, soot lines drawn by impatient hands. Words of love, jokes, arguments, small declarations of existence. I was here. By day, people passed these walls without thought. A baker hurrying to his oven, a girl carrying water, a soldier brushing dust from his sandals. Each left a trace, a name, a sigh, a promise. No one imagined that the words would outlive the voices that wrote them. When the mountain roared, the sky turned black. Ash fell like rain, covering roofs, sealing rooms, and freezing every gesture mid-breath. Fires dimmed, bodies stilled, but the graffiti remained. Lines of laughter, fragments of confession, messages meant for no one and everyone. They were preserved by accident, protected by silence. Centuries later, when archaeologists brushed the dust away, the walls began to whisper again. I love Iris, Lucius drank here. Don't believe the gods. Believe your friends. Beneath the weight of tragedy, the voices felt light, ordinary, almost joyful. They spoke not of empire or glory, but of living. There is something tender in their survival. These were not poems for kings or prayers for eternity. They were the small languages of daily life, laughter after wine, jealousy, loneliness, the need to be remembered. The eruption buried a city, but it also preserved the proof that being human was enough. As night falls over the ruins, the air grows still. The stones shine faintly in the moonlight, and the writing glows softer than memory itself. Each mark, each word, is a pulse of what once was, a city caught between noise and silence, between life and ash. Pompeii sleeps, but its walls remember.